All right, diving in deep today, folks. Meaning of life, no less. When I first saw this stack of sources, Hegel, Marx, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche,
Yeah.
even Freud, I have to admit, I thought, whoa, this is going to be intense. But isn't that what we all crave, really? Something that makes us think, challenges those assumptions, helps us see things in a new light.
Absolutely. And, it's amazing how these thinkers, they're from different times, different perspectives, but they're all wrestling with that same fundamental question. What does it mean to live a life that matters? How do we find our way in a world that can feel so, I don't know, alienating, confusing, even absurd sometimes, right?
Totally. So let's jump in. We're starting with Hegel and Marx, two guys who had, well, very different takes on history and how it shapes our lives. Hegel, if I'm getting this right, he saw history as this grand unfolding of the human spirit, all driven by reason, ultimately heading towards some kind of, perfect endpoint.
You got it. Hegel believed that through reason, humanity could reach this state of, total self-awareness, complete freedom. He even saw the society of his time, Prussian society, as a pretty good example of this progress.
Interesting. Because then we have Marx looking at that same Prussian society and seeing, well, a totally different picture. Inequality, exploitation, this deep disconnect between people and the work they do. Talk about a reality check, right?
Exactly. Marx was outraged by that gap between Hegel's idealistic vision and the reality of how people were actually living. He said, instead of finding meaning in our labor, we're actually becoming alienated from it, forced to work in ways that don't reflect our talents, our potential.
And that's where he drops that famous line, isn't it? Philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. True meaning isn't about just sitting around and thinking or accepting things as they are. It's about actively transforming the world.
You nailed it. For Marx, the meaning of life was all about revolution. Creating a society where everyone has the chance to express their talents, find fulfillment in their work. Revolution was the only way to break free from those structures that were holding people back.
Okay, so if Marx is all about revolution, Kierkegaard takes us in a completely different direction. He wasn't so focused on those big historical narratives or social structures. He was all about the individual, right? That deeply personal journey of becoming a self.
Absolutely. Kierkegaard rejected the idea that meaning could be found in these big systems or by fitting into some predefined role. For him, it was all about the individual's struggle to create their own meaning, even if that meant going against the grain.
And boy, did he like to shake things up. I read somewhere that he actually said his goal was to make life more difficult for people. You got to admire his commitment to getting people to think for themselves.
He definitely wasn't afraid to challenge people's assumptions. And one of the most powerful examples of this is his retelling of the story of Abraham and Isaac, where God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son.
Right. That story always gives me chills. But I see how Kierkegaard uses it to make his point about the leap of faith, right? Sometimes you have to act in ways that seem to contradict logic, even morality, because you're following a higher calling, something beyond reason.
You're getting it. He called it the teleological suspension of the ethical, meaning sometimes your relationship with God, your sense of purpose, it requires you to step outside of those conventional boundaries. And, this wasn't just some abstract idea for him. He famously broke off his engagement to Regina Olsen because he felt a true relationship with God demanded total sacrifice.
Wow. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. It makes you think about those times when you've had to make a tough choice. Sacrifice something important to stay true to yourself, your beliefs.
Exactly. Kierkegaard's life, his writings, are a powerful reminder that searching for meaning, it's deeply personal, often requires us to make those difficult choices.
Okay, so we've got Hegel seeing history as this march toward reason, Marx calling for revolution, Kierkegaard emphasizing the individual's leap of faith. And then comes Nietzsche, who drops his bombshell. God is dead, and we have killed him. Talk about a statement that gets your attention.
Right. Nietzsche's declaration, that death of God, it was a radical rejection of those traditional sources of meaning. He wasn't just talking about a literal God. He was challenging that whole idea of relying on external authorities, predetermined truths.
So if God is dead, where does that leave us? Does that mean life is meaningless?
Nietzsche saw it as both a crisis and an opportunity. If there are no preset answers, no heavenly blueprints, then we have the freedom and the responsibility to create our own values, forge our own path.
So it's like we're suddenly the artists of our own lives, and the canvas is blank, exciting, but also kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
How do we even start creating meaning when there's no roadmap?
That's where Nietzsche's concept of the will to power comes in. He wasn't talking about power in like a domineering sense, but rather this drive within us all to grow, to overcome challenges, to become the best versions of ourselves. It's the force behind all human creativity and achievement.
So it's not about controlling others, but mastering yourself, tapping into your full potential. I see how that could be a source of meaning, but I also wonder, could it lead to a kind of individualism that ignores the needs of others?
That's a great point. And Nietzsche definitely wrestled with that tension between individual fulfillment and our responsibilities to others. But for him, the first step was to reject what he called slave morality. That idea of following rules, seeking comfort at the expense of our true potential. He believed only by embracing our will to power could we truly live authentically.
And that's where the Übermensch comes in, right? This vision of a new kind of human who would transcend those limitations, create their own values.
Exactly. The Übermensch, or Superman, is often misunderstood. It's not about being superhuman, but a way of being. A commitment to self-mastery, creating new values that affirm life in all its fullness.
It's a powerful image, striving to become something more, something greater. But it also seems like a tall order. Are we all capable of becoming like Superman in that sense?
That's a question worth pondering. And it's one we'll continue to explore as we delve into the ideas of other thinkers who wrestled with this same tension between individual fulfillment and the needs of the community.
Okay, so we've gone from grand historical narratives to leaks of faith to the death of God and the will to power, and now get ready for a trip into the depths of the human psyche. Because next, we're diving into the world of Sigmund Freud. This should be interesting.
Freud really shifts our focus away from those grand philosophical theories and into the inner workings of our minds. He believed that to understand the meaning of life, we need to understand ourselves, especially those unconscious desires, those conflicts that shape our thoughts or feelings or behaviors.
Right, Freud was all about that unconscious, that hidden part of our minds that's bubbling beneath the surface, influencing everything we do without us even realizing it. But before we go full-on psychoanalysis, can you give us a little refresher on Freud's basic model of the psyche? The id, the ego, the superego, that whole thing.
Sure. Think of it like this. The id is that little devil on your shoulder, whispering all those primal desires and urges, driven by the pleasure principle, always seeking immediate gratification, consequences be damned.
Sounds familiar. I think we all have a little id in us.
Then you have the superego. Think of it as the angel on your other shoulder, representing your conscience, all those internalized rules, expectations that society puts on us.
Ah, the superego, always trying to keep us in line. It's that battle between do what feels good and do what's right.
Exactly. And caught in the middle, the ego, the poor I, trying to balance those demands of the id and the superego, while also navigating the real world, driven by the reality principle, trying to find ways to satisfy the id's desires, but without getting us into too much trouble.
So the ego's like the referee, trying to keep the peace between those two warring factions in our heads. But what happens when the ego can't handle the pressure? When the id's desires are too strong, or the superego's guilt trip is too intense?
Now things get interesting. Freud believed when the ego is overwhelmed, it uses these defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies to distort reality, suppress those unwanted thoughts and feelings, basically keep those psychic demons at bay.
Defense mechanisms, I've heard of those.
Yeah.
Like denial, projection, repression. It's amazing how our minds can trick us to avoid facing those uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
It's fascinating and complex. And you know, while Freud's theories have been debated, they offer valuable insights into the human condition. By understanding these forces that shape us, we can understand ourselves better, why we do the things we do.
Okay, I'm starting to see how understanding Freud could help us unlock those mysteries of our own behavior. Maybe even shed some light on this whole meaning of life thing. But I have to admit, I'm a little wary about going too deep into the unconscious. What if we uncover something we'd rather not know?
That's a valid concern. But you know, Freud also believed that by bringing those desires and conflicts to light, we could start to heal, break free from those unhealthy patterns, and ultimately live more authentically, more fulfilling lives.
So it's not just about analyzing and picking apart our psyches, but using that knowledge to become more self-aware and to make positive changes. That I can get behind.
Absolutely. And while Freud's ideas were groundbreaking, he wasn't the last word. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how his theories influenced other thinkers and how their work can help us navigate this crazy thing called modern life.
So we've just scratched the surface of Freud's model of the psyche, the id, ego, superego. all those defense mechanisms that pop up when our minds try to protect us from anxiety. It's a lot to take in, but I'm already seeing how these ideas could help us make sense of, why we do the things we do.
It's a powerful framework, that's for sure. And Freud's work really paved the way for a whole bunch of other psychoanalytic thinkers who took his ideas and, well, ran with them.
So it's like Freud had his school, but his students weren't afraid to break out and explore new territory. They weren't just blindly following the Freudian dogma. They were pushing the boundaries, coming up with new ways to understand how our minds work.
Exactly. One of the most influential schools that came out of Freud's work is object relations theory. This one focuses on how our early relationships, those bonds we form as babies and little kids with our caregivers, how those shape our later relationships and our overall sense of self.
So those early relationships become the model for how we connect with people throughout our lives. And if those early relationships were, let's say, a bit messy, well, that could lead to some interesting stuff in our adult relationships.
Right on. Object relations theory suggests that we kind of internalize those early interactions, how we were nurtured, responded to, loved, or maybe even neglected. And those become part of our internal working model for how relationships are supposed to be. It can affect everything, from who we choose as partners to how we handle conflict.
Makes you think about all the baggage we carry around from childhood, huh? How those early experiences can shape how we see the world, our place in it, often without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. And then we have family systems theory, which takes an even broader view. It shifts the focus from the individual to the family as a whole unit, recognizing that, well, people don't exist in isolation. We're all part of this complex, interconnected system.
So instead of just looking at what's going on inside one person's head, we're looking at how the whole family operates, how each person's actions and reactions affect everyone else. Sounds like a delicate dance, with everyone's emotions and behaviors constantly in play.
Great analogy. Family systems theory helps us see how family dynamics, the unspoken rules, the way we communicate, the alliances, rivalries, all that can shape individual behavior and even contribute to, psychological distress.
Wow, I can already see how these ideas apply to my own family. I mean, who hasn't had a little family drama now and then, right?
Yeah, right. We all come from families, and each family has its own unique history, its own patterns, its own way of doing things. Family systems theory can be a real tool for understanding those dynamics and even for making positive changes.
So it's not just about figuring out our own individual issues, but about seeing how we fit into this larger system, how those family relationships can affect our well-being. It's like that saying, it takes a village, but in this case, it takes a family. For better or worse.
Exactly. And as we dig deeper into these psychoanalytic ideas, we run into this fascinating concept of sublimation.
Yeah.
Remember how Freud talked about those primal urges, those impulses that can be kind of disruptive if they're not channeled in a healthy way?
Right. The gred wants what it wants when it wants it.
Right.
But, well, society has rules. We can't just act on every impulse no matter how tempting. So what do we do with all that energy?
Well, that's where sublimation comes in. It's a defense mechanism, but in a way, it lets us channel those drives, the aggression, the sexual impulses, into outlets that are acceptable, even creative.
So instead of letting those darker impulses run wild, we transform them into something positive, something that benefits us, A&D society.
Precisely. Think of artists, musicians, writers, athletes. They're often tapping into those deep wells of emotion and experience, channeling that energy into their creative work. It can be a powerful way to find meaning and purpose, to connect with something bigger than ourselves, to give something beautiful, something meaningful back to the world.
That's pretty inspiring. But isn't there a risk of suppressing those raw emotions too much? If you're constantly sublimating, redirecting our energy, could we end up losing touch with, what we're really feeling, disconnected from our true selves?
That's a great question. It brings up a really important distinction between what we call pathological anxiety and ontological anxiety. Pathological anxiety, that's the kind that really gets in the way of living. The debilitating kind often needs professional help to manage.
That's right, like when fear and worry take over and they stop us from doing the things we want, pursuing our dreams, connecting with people.
Exactly. But ontological anxiety is different. It's this existential awareness, of life's fragility, the uncertainty of the future, the fact that, well, we're all going to die someday. It's not something to be cured, but rather something to acknowledge, maybe even embrace as part of what it means to be human.
So that feeling of awe and wonder we get when we look up at the stars, contemplating the vastness of the universe, it can be a bit overwhelming, even scary. But it's also a reminder that we're part of something much, much bigger.
Yes. And that realization, it can be humbling and inspiring at the same time. It can lead to a deeper appreciation for life, a stronger sense of connection with others, and a real motivation to live fully, authentically, even with all the uncertainty, the impermanence of it all.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it makes me think about something we've been circling around this whole time. This search for meaning in a world that can feel so confusing, so chaotic. It seems like each of these thinkers, in their own way, is trying to grapple with that fundamental question. What does it mean to live a good life, a meaningful life, when it feels like the ground is constantly shifting beneath our feet?
You're spot on. And as we move into the 20th century and beyond, we see a real shift in how we approach that question. The old grand narratives of religion, traditional philosophy, they start to lose their grip. There's a growing focus on individual experience, personal meaning making, the search for authenticity in a world that feels increasingly fragmented and impersonal.
So it's like we're trading those stained glass windows of traditional beliefs for something more, well, personalized,
Right.
focusing on our own unique experiences, our own interpretations of the world. Exciting in a way, that freedom to create our own meaning, but also kind of daunting, isn't it? How do we navigate all these possibilities and find our own path?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one we'll continue to explore as we look at the work of other thinkers who face this challenge. How to create meaning in a world where those old certainties have crumbled and the answers aren't so clear-cut anymore.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We've gone from revolution to leaps of faith, the unconscious mind.
Mm.
And this idea of belonging keeps popping up for me. Like we're all searching for that place where we fit in, whether it's in history and some divine plan, or even just our families and communities.
It is. And it makes me think about how often that search for meaning is tied to connection, right? A sense of purpose that goes beyond just ourselves.
Exactly. But what if the key to meaning isn't about fitting in? What if it's about, standing OUT, embracing those things that make us unique, even if it means going against the grain?
Now that's an interesting thought. Takes us back to Nietzsche and his Übermensch, doesn't it? He wasn't talking about a literal Superman, right? But a new kind of human who breaks free from those old rules, those conventions, creates their own values.
So it's not about fitting into a mold, but forging your own path, even if it means getting uncomfortable, embracing what makes you different.
You got it. And that can be scary for a lot of people. It means taking risks, accepting the possibility of failure, maybe even facing rejection. But it also means embracing who you truly are, your unique gifts, your perspective, and finding a way to express those in the world.
It's like that quote, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. Maybe Nietzsche was onto something with that will to power. Not about dominating others, but owning your own strength, your potential, becoming the author of your own story.
I love that. And it connects back to Marx, too, and his idea of alienation. Remember, he saw how those structures, those systems, could make us feel disconnected, like we're not living up to our true selves, our creative potential.
Stuck in a rut, like cogs in a machine. Our talents and passions stifle. Makes you wonder how many people out there feel like their lives lack meaning because they haven't had the chance to really be themselves.
It's a heavy thought. And Marx's solution was revolution, right? Not just political, but a revolution in how we think about work, community, our whole relationship to the world.
Revolution. It's a big word. It can be messy, unpredictable. And even if we change those systems, how do we make sure the new ones are any better? That we're not just trading one kind of problem for another.
That's the real challenge, and that's why this idea of personal transformation is so crucial. If we want a better world, we have to start by changing ourselves, becoming more aware, more compassionate, more courageous, breaking free from our own limitations, and embracing the possibility of becoming something more.
So it's not just about changing the world out there, but changing the world in here, within ourselves, facing those fears, those insecurities, those voices that tell us we're not enough.
Exactly. And that's where Freud and all those who came after him can be so helpful. By understanding those forces that shape us, we can start to unravel those patterns that keep us stuck, change that negative self-talk, embrace self-acceptance and empowerment.
It's like we're all carrying these invisible backpacks filled with baggage from our past, right? Traumas, disappointments, those beliefs that weigh us down. And sometimes we need help unpacking those bags, letting go of what's no longer serving us.
Absolutely. Therapy, reflection, creative expression, they can all be tools for that unpacking. They can help us process those tough emotions, understand ourselves better, and develop healthier ways of coping.
It's like we're all on this journey of self-discovery, and there are all these tools we can use along the way. It's not about finding a magic formula for happiness or meaning, but about doing the work. The messy, challenging, but often incredibly rewarding work of becoming the best version of ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. And as we wrap up our deep dive into the meaning of life, I think it's important to remember there's no one right answer. What gives your life meaning might be completely different from what gives mine meaning. And that's okay. The journey is unique, it's personal, and it's constantly evolving.
So it's not about finding the answer, but asking the right questions, being open to the journey and trusting the path will unfold as we go.
Precisely. It's about embracing the whole human experience, the good and the bad, the highs and lows, and weaving it all together into something that feels authentic and meaningful to you, creating a story that's uniquely yours, reflecting your values, your passions, your deepest desires.
Maybe that's the meaning of it all. To embrace that messy, beautiful, confusing, and utterly unique tapestry of our own lives, and find a way to make it a work of art, a testament to that incredible human capacity to create meaning, even when faced with uncertainty and impermanence.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, time for us to surface from this deep dive. To all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Keep asking those big questions, keep exploring, and keep creating a life that feels meaningful to you. Until next time, keep diving deep.